Today we're going to have a look at how we can analyse the text of Romeo and Juliet. Now I appreciate you haven't seen the actual written play by Shakespeare, but the skills that we're going to talk about today are incredibly useful in everyday life in how we can pick out key details in text that we're reading, whether that's a novel that you want to understand a bit better, or if that's a news article or even a gossip column, and you can really start to look for those different themes and those different techniques that are used by the writer. So what are we looking out for then? We're looking at the form. That's the name of the type of text that the writer might use. For example, there are adverts and scripts and sonnets and novels. They're all different text types that a writer can use. The form of a text is important because it shows the writer's intentions, characters, or its key themes. In this case, we're looking at the play, the form, and how Shakespeare manipulates the audience. You can look at the structure, so how is the plot ordered and put together for the reader. You can think of the plot at a text level, but also as a sentence level. In this case, we're going to look at the order of events in Shakespeare's play. Possibly most importantly, we can look at the language. This is the words that the writer actually uses and the impact that they can have. In this case, we're going to have a look at the words that Shakespeare uses. So what words does he use? Why does he use them? What effect do they have? Does he employ any language devices in his writing? For example, does he use metaphor or imagery? Does he use alliteration and pathetic fallacy? If you're unsure what any of those words mean, I would suggest you pause this video now and look them up, especially things like pathetic fallacy. As you go through your education, it's going to be something which will become more of a theme in the text that you look at. So the use of form in Romeo and Juliet then. So form is the text type that the writer chooses to write in. The form of Romeo and Juliet is a play. Plays are meant to be performed by actors and watched by an audience. Nowadays, instead of a play, you might watch a TV show or a film, and these are effectively just recorded plays. It's really important. You need to remember that Shakespeare was meant to be performed and to be seen. This is really useful because it can be a bit dry when you're just reading through the play script. The play is also a tragedy. A Shakespearean tragedy is a type of play that results in the main protagonist, that's the main character's deaths in tragic circumstances. So if you think back to some of the other videos that we've looked at, obviously we have the tragic, the really, really sad suicide of Romeo and Juliet. What about its structure then? So when we're looking at the structure, we need to think about how Shakespeare's ordered his text. How has he put the text together? There's two aspects to consider. We've got the text level. This is how the text is constructed as a whole. We need to think about the opening, the middle, and the ending of Romeo and Juliet. Within this, we're going to have a look at how characters or themes progress and develop in the narrative. That's the storytelling. We also have a sentence level. This is how the text is constructed at that sentence level. And within this, we're going to have a look at what types of sentence he uses, what the length of those sentences are, and again, how that impacts on the ordering of events within each act. So then, the use of structure within Romeo and Juliet at the text level. So the play is split into 5 acts. That's almost like 5 chapters in a novel or 5 episodes of a TV series. And outlined here is a summary of what happens in each act. So in Act 1, we've got the battle between the two families, where the prince declares that the next battle will result in exile. Romeo and Juliet meet and they fall in love. We all know how this is going to end, yeah? We've got Act 2, where Romeo and Juliet decide to get married in secret, and Friar Lawrence organises and blesses the wedding. In Act 3, Tybalt kills Mercutio, Romeo avenges Mercutio's death by killing Tybalt, and Romeo is banished, but he does manage to spend the night with Juliet, consummating their marriage. Lord Capulet decides that Juliet must marry Paris, but she's not really too happy about this. Now we think back to Act 1, where it says that the prince is going to exile the next people who fight from these two families, and then we come to Act 3 and it's actually happening. We've got some foreshadowing there of the future events. In Act 4, Juliet goes to Friar Lawrence, where they come up with the plan, and Juliet fakes her death so she can be with Romeo. What could possibly go wrong? Act 5, Romeo receives the message that Juliet's died, and he goes to the Capulet vault, the tomb where the body is. And when he sees her there, he kills himself with poison. Unfortunately, Juliet wakes up, and then she kills herself with Romeo's dagger. And the play ends, and the two families are reunited. when we're analysing the structure of Romeo and Juliet, we need to think about how Shakespeare develops these key themes or characters throughout the narrative and the plot of the play. He doesn't just go, here's what's going to happen, and it happens, and then it ends. He subtly hints at what could happen, and then builds the tension until you have this crescendo and this whole climax of everything that's going to happen, and then it peters off into our ending where the families come back together through their united grief and sense of loss. So then, let's have a look at this question then. So why does Shakespeare open Romeo and Juliet with a prologue that details the play's content? If you've not read the play yet, then effectively what happens is it opens up and it talks about the tale of fair Verona, where there's these two warring households who've been fighting for as long as anyone can remember. No one really knows why they're fighting, and it goes through some of the details about why these people really don't get on. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes, or a minute or so, just to have a think about what Shakespeare's intention in doing this are. I'll give you another 30 seconds. Okay, so hopefully you were able to think of a couple of reasons to why somebody might outline what's going to happen in a play before you've actually seen it, or what's going to happen in a story before you've actually seen it. So what we need to know then is that Shakespeare wanted the audience to be aware that this was a tragic play. He wanted the audience to have that anticipation of this big final event, what's going to happen, what's going to lead to this becoming a tragedy. This is clearly a love story, isn't it? Like, it's going to have a nice happy ending. Well, no, from the start you know it's not going to, which leads to that anticipation of what you think might be the cause of that tragedy. That means that, you know, the audience is excited, it's enthralled with the play's plot. People want to know what's going to happen. They want to know how this is going to all come to an end. The audience feels sympathetic towards the main characters. They feel sorry for them because they know that in these two characters' love, they're just going to find pain and ultimately death. When we're looking at structure on a sentence level then, it can be important to think about how the writer has created a sentence and what its purpose is. Below, we've got an extract from the play's first prologue. So it says, the fearful passage of their death-marked love and the continence of their parents' rage, which but their children end not but could remove, is now the 2 hours' traffic of our stage, the which, if you with patient ears attend, what here shall miss, our toil shall strive to mend. So it's saying there, as you look through, you know, we know that this is going to be a story about a love which ends in death. We know that the parents aren't going to be happy about it. We know that the parents are going to continue to hate each other until the children have been removed from the situation. We know that the play is going to be 2 hours long. And we know that, you know, you're going to have to pay attention, you're going to have to really listen so that you can find out how this rivalry came to an end. So then, what does this structure use? And so we've got rhyme. So in the prologue there is a rhyme. For example, we've got rage and stage. We've got rhyming couplets. It ends with a rhyming couplet of attend and mend. This shows that the two words belong to each other, highlighting that if the audience is attentive, the play will mend the conflict of the two families. You, so it's the direct address of you, makes the audience aware the narrator is talking directly to them, gets them involved in the story. Nowadays, within a more media-centric theatre thinking, you might think of that as being the breaking of the fourth wall. So we're going to have a think about some of the language within Romeo and Juliet then. So when we're writing about language, we're going to comment on the words that are actually used, how they're used and what their impact is. So when you're writing about language, there's a simple structure that you can use. So what has the writer done? How have they done it? Why have they done it? And what is its effect? So firstly, the imagery then. So how has he done it? A pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventured pietas overthrows doth with their death bury their parents' strife. Why has he done this? Shakespeare's used this to allow the audience to imagine the play's plot from the very beginning. The image of a pair of star-crossed lovers is very tragic and symbolises two people who've gone against fate to be with each other with disastrous consequences. This is quite exciting for the audience, as they're watching a play with tragic consequences. Everybody loves a good death in a story. From the onset, the audience knows what is going to happen and witnesses the downfall of the two main characters of Romeo and Juliet. We've got metaphorical language. I have a soul of lead, so stakes me to the ground, I cannot move. He's used this to highlight Romeo's feelings towards Rosaline. Remember we talked the other day about how Rosaline, the first unrequited love that Romeo feels, and he's obsessed with her, and then suddenly he's forgotten all about her. Romeo describes his soul as being heavy as lead. This illustrates that Romeo believes he is in love, and it also tells us that Romeo is particularly dramatic. This makes the audience wary of Romeo's feelings towards Juliet, as he claimed to love Rosaline like 5 minutes ago, and he was prepared to do anything to be with Rosaline, and he was obsessed with her, and she was the most perfect woman in the entire world, and then along comes Juliet, and he's like, who's Rosaline? We've got rhyming couplets. For never was a story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo. So Shakespeare finishes his play with the rhyming couplet of woe and Romeo. Woe meaning sadness, remember. So this makes the audience feel sympathetic towards Romeo and Juliet, as it recognises how their love story is tragic and full of sadness. In this passage, Romeo has just realised that Juliet is a Capulet and has gone back to talk to her. He spies on her on the Capulet balcony. So there's that really famous scene with the Juliet balcony, and she's looking down into the garden. He's hopped over the wall. He says, "Is that my lady? Oh, it is my love. Oh, there she knew she were. She speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that? Her eye discourses, I will answer it." So here's how we're going to analyse this quotation to show Shakespeare, how Shakespeare presents Romeo's feelings towards Juliet. So we've got the repetition of the personal pronoun my. This indicates that Romeo feels Juliet belongs to him. It's that sense of ownership. They're bound together already. This shows how he feels about Juliet. It doesn't matter what happens, he is going to love Juliet. It doesn't matter about the past, it doesn't matter about who she is, he wants to be with Juliet. We've got Lady Love. The titles Romeo gives to Juliet indicate that how he feels about her. It's quite simple, you know. She is a lady and he loves her. She speaks, yet she says nothing. This is an oxymoron. It's something which is saying something is both true and not true, or something which is happening and not happening. So Romeo's stating that Juliet speaks, but she doesn't say anything. Obviously it's not possible, is it? So from this, Shakespeare hints that Romeo has a connection with Juliet that the audience isn't aware of, or that they would understand. So it's like when you look at someone and you know instantly what they're thinking. What of that? This rhetorical question, if you think back to some of your other English lessons, we know a rhetorical question is a question that doesn't have an answer. So Romeo is questioning his thoughts and feelings aloud. He can't believe that he has this instantaneous connection with Juliet, and he can't believe that he as a Montague has fallen in love with a Capulet. So when you're thinking about how we can analyse a text, these are all the different skills and the different things that we need to pick out. These are the things you need to pay attention to when you're reading a text in order to gain that level of understanding. Hopefully that's been helpful for you today, and I'll see you next time.